Councillor Michael Locke. I'm the convener for this meeting, and this is a meeting of the Community Growing Scrutiny Working Group. For the benefit of the people online, I think we should go around the table and introduce each other. So I've already introduced myself, and we go on to Rachel and then go over there.
I'm Rachel Percival, Scrutiny Officer.
So we start over that side first.
Catherine Thomas, part of the Nature Conservation Team, and I'm a Communities and Nature Project Officer.
Deb Hill, I'm the Nature Conservation Team Leader in the Natural Environment section.
Hello, I'm Mike Scott. I'm the AONB Officer for Gower.
And I've already introduced myself, but I'll say it again. My name is Councillor Michael Locke, and I'm the chair of the meeting today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Councillor Cyril Anderson, Cabinet Member for Waste Management, but this portfolio as well.
Good afternoon, I'm Gemma Bevan. I'm the Community Initiative Coordinator with Cultural Services.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Anthony Richards. I'm the Tackling Poverty Development Manager in the Tackling Poverty Service.
Afternoon, everyone. My name's Lee Cambouli. I'm the Principal Officer for the Tackling Poverty Service.
Hello, I'm Ronan Ruddy. I'm one of the Assistant Managers in the Local Area Coordination Team.
Right, that's great. Thank you very much, everybody. And the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence, where I asked Rachel. Are there any apologies?
Yeah, we've had apologies from Councillor Linda James, and we've also had apologies from Cabinet Member Alison Anthony.
Next item on the agenda, item 2, disclosures of personal or prejudicial interest, which I presume is nobody. There usually is. And the next one is prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. No. And the fourth item is questions from the public. I asked Rachel formally if there are questions.
Yeah, we have had some public questions. So the gentleman who's put them forward isn't able to attend. So if you're able to ask those questions on his behalf, please.
So this is a question from a member of the public, a gentleman called Ollie Lister, and his item is 1, 2, 3. Number 1, for the purpose of this report / discussion, how is community growing defined? 2, what is the council planning to do to encourage new levels of community interest in community growing? How is it going to spread the word beyond the groups already involved? 3, is there a clear departmental / organisational framework for the development of new projects from community interest through to establishment of projects? Correct. So could I ask the Cabinet Member initially, could we have a response, please, to that question?
Yeah, I would like to thank the person involved, but I'll hand over to Anthony to answer them questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. I will, representing the officers that compiled the report, I'll answer the questions, but if any of my officer colleagues would like to chip in on anything that I say, then feel free to do so. So question 1, which was around defining community growing in context of the report. The report itself doesn't seek to establish a definition of community growing, nor a definition of community growing for Swansea Council. As officers involved in supporting community growing projects in different ways, we recognise that community involvement is integral to community growing, and it can take various forms from informal to formal. Quite often community growing can include for the growing of food, but is not necessarily limited to growing of food alone. And we also recognise that community growing can provide benefits for biodiversity and green infrastructure. But as I say, the report itself doesn't seek to set out a definition, but that's a kind of summary in terms of representing the work streams that we're involved in. That would make sense. If you're happy with that, I'll move on to question 2, which was around the council's activity to encourage new levels of community interest in community growing, and how it's going to spread the word beyond the groups that are already involved. As I said in my introduction, I'm from the Tackling Poverty Service. I'm going to draw from an example of the work that I'm involved in. So the Tackling Poverty Service, we administer a number of grants that community groups from the third sector can apply for, much like many of my colleagues that are here today. And the grants that I'm involved in are around tackling food poverty, and some of those grants it's eligible that can support community growing projects. So when we launch a grant, they are promoted, they're targeted specifically to all kinds of organisations and groups that are involved in tackling food poverty and food insecurity, some of which have established community growing projects, some have not, but they have the opportunity to learn about what's eligible and to consider, you know, is it something that's going to be appropriate for them to pursue. We also work closely with the council's corporate comms team to launch grants in the public space, taking full use of the council's social media platform, so that the availability of these schemes and the funding that's available to support them is out there in the public domain, you know, trying to reach as many people as possible to let them know. That's some examples from my area of work. I'm not sure if any of my other colleagues want to add anything to that.
Yeah, if I can add, thank you, Anthony, thank you, Chair. The Nature Conservation Team for many years has supported community green space and community growing and biodiversity projects. Again, we mainly do this with grant money that we receive from Welsh Government, and it's been very much a reactive role in a sense that we get groups approaching us rather than us going out to look specifically for projects. But we have worked very closely with the Environment Centre's Green Space project and continue to do that. And, you know, they obviously have got people on the ground going out and visiting groups and providing advice, as well as officers in my team and Mike's.
I'll come back in to pick up on the third public question, which was around asking if there is a clear departmental organisational framework for development of new projects, from community interest through to the establishment of projects. As the report that we'll be looking at, as that kind of shows, there's a lot of work going on across different departments to support community groups to develop projects around community growing at different stages. And in order to answer to that question, I would say that the council really, there's a no wrong front door approach to providing that support for community groups that are interested in community growing. Typically, groups or individuals would utilise the contacts that they already have with the council. So that might be via the local area coordination team, it might be via a local housing office, the nature conservation team, or through cultural services or teams like myself that administer various grants. So yeah, usually they'll utilise the contacts that they already have. And I think, you know, officers across the authority then are responsive to those requests and do work cross-departmentally to provide the relevant links to services and contacts. And something else to add is that it, with these queries, and I'm sure the experience of my colleagues is the same, it's not always a one size fits all. There's various variables to the request that might take it in a different direction, such as, you know, the land ownership or potential future development plans for that plot of land. There's various kind of variables that could take the process of developing the community growing project in different directions. So in short, no wrong front door, and officers across different departments kind of work collectively in collaboration to support and make those links for people. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. And we now go on to item 5, the actual community growing report. And this will initially be led.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Chair and the committee for inviting myself and officers here today. And secondly, I would like to thank all the officers for all the hard work they have done for the community projects and putting this report together. I'd like to point out that there are 8 factors in this report that supports community growing and poverty, such as supporting community grants. The Welsh Government grant schemes have allocated significant funding, over £689,000, to tackle food poverty and insecurity, with a proportion supporting community growing projects. This funding has enabled various organisations to engage in initiatives that promote community gardening. There's a positive impact on food banks and vulnerable community grants receipts like St John's Food Bank, Swansea Community Farm and Clydach Community Gardens have reported thriving gardening increased food productions. These initiatives not only enhance the availability of fresh produce, but also contributes to environmental sustainability through practices like composting and water conservation. Community engagement and skills building funding has facilitated workshops, i.e. cooking sessions and volunteer training, leading to increased community engagement and skill development. Organisations like Race Council Cymru and Clydach Community Gardens have emphasised the importance of gardening in fostering well-being and unity amongst diverse communities. Men's Sheds project, Swansea Council's funding for men's sheds projects include those supporting community growing, has led to positive outcomes such as increased membership, community engagement and mental health support through the gardening activities. Item 5 is sustainable food partnerships. Funding from the Welsh Government has supported the development of sustainable food partnerships in Swansea, promoting collaboration amongst various stakeholders to address food-related challenges and support initiatives like community growing. Promotion of sustainable agriculture projects funded by both Abertawe focused on sustainable agriculture, community growing and local food production. Initiatives like CSA development, horticultural training and school gardening programs contribute to food security, education and environmental stewardship. Awareness of the advocacy, Bwr Abertawe facilitates networks events, workshops and e-news to raise awareness and advocate for sustainable food practices. The Sustainable Food Plan objectives aim to address food poverty, promote healthy eating, support local economies and combat climate change through sustainable food initiatives. Health and environmental benefits, community food growing initiatives offer numerous benefits including improved human health and well-being, sustainable land usage, enhanced soil health, biodiversity conservation and support for local economies. Overall, the highlighted initiatives demonstrate a concerted effort by this council to address food insecurity, promote community engagement and to foster sustainable food systems with a focus of community growing as a means to achieve these goals. I'd like to hand over now to Anthony Richards, who is going to take you through the agenda items. If there's any questions, feel free. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chair. I think you've summarised some of the kind of key highlights from the report quite well there. So I'll just add that I'm taking the pleasure of presenting this report on behalf of my colleagues from other services within the authority that have contributed to compiling this report. As you can see in the content, we have support for community groups from the Tackling Poverty Service, local area coordination team, the community development team and cultural services, nature conservation and AOB team, and also property services have all fed into this report. I'll take some learning of my own from compiling that report. We can see that links are actually made between officers from different departments as well to support those groups. We can see that the report highlights that some groups are supported by more than one service within the authority, and that officers are linked internally to be able to provide that support in a coordinated way. And of course, we'll always look to improve and collaborate how we go about that in the future. But I think, yeah, just to summarise that this is a response from a number of services to the report, and yes, I'm taking the pleasure of reporting it on their behalf. Thank you.
Okay, yes, I was going to say, any other officers wish to add anything to the report? Yes,
if I
please.
could, Chair. I have just noticed that one of the teams which isn't reported in the report is the external funding team through what used to be the European funding schemes, but is currently the Levelling Up Fund. I'm aware that they also have supported community growing schemes of various sorts over the past 5 to 10 years. And they're currently supporting at least one or two in the current round of grants.
Right, thank you very much. Any other officers wish to add anything?
I mean, perhaps it's clear from the report that a lot of this work, collaborative work between the council and the community groups, clearly there's a growing interest, sorry for the pun, but there is a growing interest in people wanting to get involved with these kind of schemes, but they are primarily dependent on grant funding, which is often short term. So, there is an issue there as to how we can perhaps make it more sustainable in the long run.
Right, thank you very much. Any other comments or from any officers? No. Sorry, I'll say that again. We've actually got number of questions is 7 and the number of councillors is 4. So the first councillor on my list is Councillor Guy Jenkins, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for a very good report there for us to look at. Now, I picked up on one question there, which is in paragraph 5.3 of the report, and it's in reference to the training sessions from the Orchard project. Now, I've set up a mini orchard in Gowerton, and I'm interested in what's mentioned there, training for pruning and what can be made out of the fruits. Is this something the Orchard project can help with? And could you sort of give a brief explanation on what the Orchard project is? Is it a standalone team or part of the council? Thank you.
Yes, please.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Yes, the Orchard project is part of a wider UK initiative, and it operates in 4 cities across the UK, with Swansea being the only Welsh project. It's funded through a charity, the Moon Dance Foundation primarily, and that employs 2 part-time staff who run the training and support groups to plant new community orchards, as well as looking after and restoring old existing orchards. So they do and have provided quite a wide range of training sessions on pruning, grafting, what to do with the fruit produce, how to do juicing, as well as planting the trees and selecting the trees themselves. So the answer is yes, they can provide training, but as I mentioned earlier, the funding is now running out from the Moon Dance Foundation. So they're looking at alternative sources of funding. I know they've got some from Gower College and I think perhaps one of the community councils, but you know, if I think it'd be worth approaching them to ask whether they could run some additional sessions, and maybe if small amounts of funding could be found from councillors' budgets or community councillors, then obviously that would make it much more likely that they could come and run something in your area.
Yeah, well, who are they, and how would you be getting in touch with them?
So they do have a website, but basically it's Kate Davis, who also works for Coeden Vach, and a colleague, Witch Hazel Wildwood, which another appropriate name for the project. So you know, I can provide their contact details, email details, if that would be helpful.
Oh, great. I think they're over Denvent, aren't they? Yeah, Summit's up, is it? Okay, if you can provide, then that would be great. Thank you.
Right, any other officers wish to pass comment on that question? Right, if not, sorry. Okay, I should say that again. Right. Are there any other officers who wish to add to the question, to the earlier question? No. The next one on the list is a question 2, and that is from Councillor Lyndon Jones. So
Great,
we go over to Councillor Lyndon.
Great, thanks, Chair. Before I get on to that question, mention the fact I think Cyril mentioned about obviously growing food and food poverty. One of the things that we did on Education Scrutiny was to look at cookery in schools, and we need to get back to be doing that. And that's something we're going to be doing on an ongoing basis, because if people are then taught in schools how to cook, they'll then know what to, how to set about it, because if we're going to get rid of food poverty, that's a real way of doing it. My question was, do any schemes exist where people who are unable to maintain or use their own gardens for growing, can these be offered up to other members of the community or community groups for growing? And I'm thinking of probably elderly people who can't maintain their gardens. And is there an opportunity that, we can get groups to, if you like, develop that garden for them, grow vegetables and so on, and they might even be able to get some of those vegetables back?
Right, could we have a reply from the officer?
Thank you for the question, Councillor. I'll take the lead on answering this question for you. So the council doesn't operate such a scheme, but there are schemes available. There's an example of one I'd like to reference, which is called Lend and Tend. You could look that up, and certainly we could share the link with the group. Lend and Tend, it's a national project where they link, as you say, both people who have gardens, but perhaps for one reason or another they're either unable to look after them, or perhaps they would just like to, you know, make them available for people to grow on. It can link those people with gardens, as I say, to people who are looking for a growing opportunity with a garden. On the website, you can go on there. There's a map, and I could see, you know, having a quick look at that there are in fact gardens registered within Swansea with the Lend and Tend scheme. Obviously, it's not a council run initiative. It is a national project, which I believe started off in England. Yeah, I think that, you know, that's the example that I would refer to. I'm not sure if any of my other colleagues would want to add anything to that response.
Will I just mention briefly the Grow from Home project? So there is a small initiative that's been piloted in Clace, which is run through Kaitan, and it's providing support, advice and guidance to encourage people who live in council houses to grow food in their own gardens. So teaching them how to grow vegetables, you know, in small plots, and then that's linking through to, you know, to how to learn to cook some of that food as well. So, and just maybe worth mentioning another scheme called Cyfoeth y Coed, which is a scheme that offers to go and collect fruit from trees in other people's, you know, either in gardens or other places, just to sort of help the collection and harvesting of fruit when people don't have the resources perhaps to do it themselves.
Okay, so we don't have any more comments? No. Okay.
Could I come back on that? I think it's a way of thinking outside the box, because that land would be available in every road, every street in Swansea. And it's a way of, if you like, getting more able people to engage with older people as well. So you've also got that community contact as well, which and they could get some fruit or food out of it as well. So it's certainly something we need to think about, and I think rather than being done on an ad hoc basis, I think it's something that needs to be organised. But I think there's a real opportunity for us to do that. And as I say, not only from a food growing point of view, but from a well-being point of view for all the elderly residents who can't look after their own gardens.
Right, the next item is question 3, and this is also from Councillor Lyndon Jones.
Great, thanks, Chair. And this was, have the council launched or considered launching community growing projects on any of the large estates in Swansea? I visited one in Penrhys in the Rhondda, which is on the top of the mountain, and where they had a lot of vandalism, and they created this community growing space where people were growing vegetables and so on. And there's great community involvement, and that, you know, you've seen all the sort of damage to gardens and so on, so all sort of disappear because of that sort of commitment by people.
Right, so any officers wish to respond? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. It's me again to respond to your question. For the first observation that, and again, I'll let officers join into my response as well. But the first observation that I make with the question is that, you know, through experience, really successful community projects, whether it's around growing or whatever it may be, typically are initiated by the community. It's built on the foundation is having that community interest there. And you know, thinking back to perhaps some of the earlier questions that we had in the public questions around how officers kind of respond to those queries from communities, and how we try to support, whether it's through grant funding or making links with officers or other bodies to move projects forward. That is something that we try to do. But it's really important that projects have that community the community behind them in their inception. Also, support for new community growing projects is currently provided by the Environment Centre and the Swansea Green Spaces project, which Deb referred to earlier. Support there through that includes advice and guidance on getting started with funding, through to setting up, through to volunteering and signposting to relevant organisations, through to training on setting up community growing spaces and development of a toolkit to ease the process of establishing community space. Officers across departments, including officers that are here today, are actually, are engaged with Swansea Green Spaces project. Many of us are actually meeting with colleagues there this week and next. So those links are made. But in order to go back to your question, really critical from my perspective and from my learning for any successful community project is that the community, it comes from the community are initiating that. It's an idea that they have and are keen to take forward. That's a key ingredient.
Just to add to that, I think that is really important because it's not just establishing these projects; it's the ongoing maintenance, and it's really important that there is that ongoing buy-in and responsibility for looking after these projects. And whether they be in a school ground or a park or housing area, we do need to try and ensure, and it's in fact a condition of some of the grant money, that they commit to managing and looking after those sites for at least sort of 5 years. So just to mention that as well.
Any other officers wish to pass comment? No? Yes?
I'm Mike Scott again. My interest is limited to Gower because that's the extent of my remit. We have been supporting 2 community growing schemes, the 2 CSAs, Kaitan CSA and Big Meadow CSA. We have provided setup support, setup grants for both of them. But the intention always was that as CSAs, they would be self-financing within 3 to 4 years. And they've both been very successful and done that. And their food production is now self-supporting. We've been really delighted with those 2 projects. And I would simply recommend them as models. There are a wide variety of models about, but those have worked very well, and they've worked really well, not because we developed them, but because the organisers were so committed and were so convinced that they could stand these up and make them work in the long term. And we'd always seen them as we gave them a helping hand to start. They're up and running, and they are up and away now. We've then supported other things like links with schools, links with volunteers, links with training, both online and on site. But the core food growing activities have always been self-financing.
Good. Any other further comments, officers? No. In which case, sorry, go on to question number 4 from Councillor Woe Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, first question. Really, we've in recent years had a community orchard installed in Mumbles, which has been very successful. I know Lyndon in Bishopston's just planted one. I'm just wondering if there's ever been any work to identify other opportunities. Obviously, funding's always an issue, but you could leave that maybe to ward members and just make them aware of a certain opportunity that might, be a good location for a community orchard, for example. So I'm just wondering if any work on identifying potential sites has ever been done.
Yeah, just to mention a couple of things, really. I mean, as I said earlier, most of the work that we are giving advice, the groups that we give advice to, is come from directly from them rather than us going out looking for sites necessarily. But we do have a project called Wild About Our Ward, and Catherine here is one of the key officers who's leading on that, where we've actually mapped for each ward, we've mapped various features of biodiversity value and accessible natural green space. Maybe that's a topic we can share at another occasion. But I think we have got maps showing where all the existing orchards are, or we're in the process of finalising that, and it just gradually building that up. And I think, Catherine, you said that there's about 20 wards that have already got a community growing space in them, but there may be wards that have nothing, and that might be an area that we could target for future work if the funding is maintained.
Any further comments?
I'll just add to what Deb said. The Data Map Wales GIS system identifies existing orchards. That data hasn't been ground truth, so we don't know how accurate. It lists everything from what might have been an orchard many, many years ago to active orchards to small orchards in private gardens. I am looking to see whether we can arrange for a ground survey to go back and check all of those and identify what actually exists on the ground. Historically, every farm on Gower would have had at least one orchard. I can think of 2 or 3 which I know have the remains of 2 or more. I would imagine the same is true for all the farms in Swansea. That, for me, would be a good place to start. Primarily, I must admit, I'm focusing on nature recovery and biodiversity issues, but also I think that there would be farmers who maybe no longer have an active interest in the orchard that they have on their land, but would be quite happy to see that worked on by a local group or a group of volunteers. So over the next couple of years, we will be working to see what we can do with that.
Good, thank you. Any other comments? No.
Could I just follow up on that, Chair?
Yep.
Is that okay? Yeah, I think that's really encouraging, actually, everything which was just said. And I think for local members to be identified, obviously, when you're talking about Gower, there's only one councillor for the whole of Gower, but certainly with other wards, if the ward members could be identified and shown these wild about your ward maps and potential opportunities for biodiversity improvements, orchards, anything really. I think it's obviously you can't tell them what to spend their ward budgets on, but having the opportunity there is certainly a good arm twister. So I think that's a great thing.
Right, well, many thanks. The next item, is any comment on that from any officers? No. Sorry, question 5, and this is also from Councillor Will Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. I've actually doing a bit of research, and I noticed that this question is not really relevant because it was covered quite well on the website. A list of all the allotments and how to contact each allotment is on the site. I'm not sure if they're all up to date and how often they're sort of double checked, but what I'd like to change my question, if I may, slightly, and it's basically, do all the allotments send us an annual report of their occupancy levels and any issues they're having? Because I know, obviously, they were all, I don't know if asset transfer is the right word, but the responsibilities were sent on to the allotment users themselves. So I'm just wondering if we have any capacity to sort of check those allotments, how they're running, how, is there lots of empty allotments at one site, for example, and do they need help? I know we struggle with resources. I do have another question, Chair, if I may, just after. It's a very quick one, but that's that one. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. And what did you say? Well, did you wanted to ask another question?
Yes, if I may, after that one on the annual report to the for the allotments. Thanks.
Okay, the next question. Sorry. Sorry, can the officers answer the question asked, please?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Thomas. My role is to project manage the allotment support grant, which is a Welsh Government grant. So I'm in touch with all of the 16 sites. However, they're currently self-managed by the allotment associations. So to my understanding, they don't report to the council in terms of the number of plots that are vacant. We do have some support through cultural services and through corporate property for the allotment associations. They're also directed to the National Allotment Society for support around governance issues as well.
Thank you. Any more comments?
Could I just follow up on that, Chair? I think that's interesting to hear that. You know, maybe it's not too much. I'm not sure if it's a lot of work, but it might be, you know, worth asking them to just send us an annual email just on occupancy. Just if one site, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that any of them are badly managed, but if one of them was to become badly managed, we could maybe spot in advance that one of them had, you know, several empty plots, and we could maybe do something to help them with it. But maybe just something to think about. Thanks.
Any more comments? No. I was doing this. The next question is, and when the mic's on, is question 6 from Councillor Francesca O'Brien. So if you'd like to proceed, Francesca.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, can I swap my questions round? I'm sorry to be a pain, only because Mike Scott picked up a little bit on the previous question with the farmers. And my question was that, given that, although it's not legislation yet, but the Welsh Government are proposing for farmers to have 20% of their land towards this sort of biodiversity and growing. Have we thought, if that does come into play, how we could actually use part of that land and work with the farmers?
Comments?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. I'll kick off a response to this. I'm sure some of my colleagues might want to come in and add to my response. So, if this goes ahead, yeah, then the council could support relevant contacts to be made to explore options as to what our role might be. It could be through the third sector, such as SCVS, through Swansea Nature Partnership and the Environment Centre, to support and develop relationships and arrangements between farmers and community groups. Through the land use and ecological resilience mapping, officers could provide advice to farmers on the most suitable areas for tree planting or habitat creation and management. But some of this work may well require additional resources to facilitate. I'm not sure if anyone else wants to add to that. I think Deb might want to come in.
Yeah, I'm sure Mike does as well, actually. But most of the projects we've spoken about up until now have been on publicly owned land or publicly accessible land. Obviously, you know, private land is a whole another issue, and we wouldn't be able to use the funding that we've currently got to give that kind of help. But, you know, clearly there is going to be a need for some professional advice and support, you know, as was provided, you know, in previous agricultural schemes. So I think that's one that Welsh Government are probably looking at present as to how they might provide that kind of help to landowners as part of the sustainable farming scheme.
Right. As my name was mentioned, I might as well come back as well. First of all, Councillor, I would suggest that it's quite likely that FSS, as it was previously discussed, outlined, consulted upon, will change quite drastically. So at the moment, I think I'm waiting to see what happens in terms of what comes out of the face-to-face meetings between the farming unions and Welsh ministers. As Deb has said, I think if FSS goes ahead, as it will in some form, there will be issues where we can provide advice as the council. We will be able to provide advice and support farmers and landowners in thinking about their options, but we may well not be able to do very much in terms of supporting those because of FSS. The scale of that grant scheme would completely dwarf anything the council could do, quite frankly. Most of the community growing projects that we deal with would be completely separate to that. They would be based on either areas of land that the community owned or were leased or that the council owned. I think the two are quite different. There may be issues where they overlap, but at the moment it's hard to know what's going to happen with SFS. So at the moment, I think I'm just going to wait and see what happens.
Just to add to that, I think what we, one thing we can do, we've done an awful lot of mapping of habitats and species across the whole of the county, and so at least there are maps that would show where you wouldn't want to plant trees. For example, might be a priority habitat, could be an area of peatlands or marshy grasslands. So I think in terms of making that information available, that is something that we could do, so which wouldn't necessarily cost a huge amount. But I think the trouble with the farming scheme grant is if each individual landowner is looking at their own particular bit of land, there's no strategic overview about how you might connect woodland and trees to join together to make the whole thing more resilient. So it's having that kind of strategic overview of what is our green infrastructure aspiration and our habitat ecological biodiversity plans. How does it fit into the local nature recovery action plan, for example?
Any further comments on that question? No. And that we go back to question number 6, and that is for Councillor Francesca O'Brien to ask question 6.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, and for my last question, in Mumbles, we've got a fantastic cleansing team that come down here, but unfortunately, for one day a month, going into the summer months, that we have to ask them to clean the apples and everything around the sort of the toilet area, which is a real shame because obviously it attracts rodents, but 2, you've got fruit there which is growing beautifully and it could be used. I was just wondering if there's any way that we can sort of partner up with anyone local. Obviously I didn't want to do it off our own back because I appreciate it's not ours to do, but it is on council land. Is there any way that we partnership up so that fruit's not gone to waste? Thank you.
Yeah, I mentioned an organisation earlier called Cyfoeth y Coed, and they could come and help if they had the sufficient resources. That's the kind of thing that they might be able to help with. So I think we can provide your contact details for them to follow up on that. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Anthony.
No, thanks, Deb. Yeah, just to say that project then, Deb, you may well know more about than I do, but there are volunteers that do exactly that. They collect fruit from trees, whether it be an orchard or it could be someone who has registered their tree on their land. And those fruits, yeah, they quite often go to food banks or various food aid projects in Swansea, so supporting the tackling food poverty and food insecurity agenda, which is great.
Right, any further comments? So therefore we reach the end of the questions from the various councillors, and I would just like to thank officers for attending. Oh, hang on a second. Oh yes, sorry. I've just been told off. Right. There's also a question, an additional question from Councillor Will Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry to squeeze this one in. It was just something that came to me looking over the report. Obviously, schools are a place where we'd love to encourage community growing and as much nature as possible. I noticed in the successful grants on 2.11, Oysmouth School, which is actually in our ward in Mumbles here, benefited from, which is great. Just wondering if the other schools have been made aware of certain grants and things. And obviously, I know of a couple of other schools that do projects, but maybe they don't feed in what they're doing. And I'm just wondering, I have mentioned it before in other scrutiny meetings about potentially having a governor at each school, which is responsible for biodiversity, nature, and things like that. And maybe it's something Lyndon could take up in the scrutiny education. But if we had a biodiversity governor at each school, then that might encourage that governor to, push these sorts of projects a little bit more. And just wondering what people's thoughts were on that and if there was anything like that at all. Thank you.
Any comments? Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll come in and pick up on the question around kind of schools being aware of grants. I'm going to speak only actually because we've not prepared for this question. I'm only going to speak about the grants that we administer in our Tackling Poverty service around tackling food poverty and food insecurity. So there's usually a number of grants that'll do that during the year. And I'll say that over the last 3 to 4 years, we've seen an increase in number of applications coming from various schools in Swansea to access some of that funding for some of the project work that they're doing around tackling food poverty. Obviously, the grant process is a competitive process. So we typically have applications from many of the food banks in Swansea or other projects that are supporting people that are experiencing food poverty. And they are limited. The grants are limited financially. They're not the biggest pots the council handles by any means. But we always look to get the best value and the best or good geographic spread across Swansea with that funding. So that answers part of the question. As for the biodiversity governors in schools, I'm not sure where that could be picked up as perhaps a recommendation, Rachel. Is that all right, Councillor?
Yeah, fine. I mean, as long as other people think it's worth picking up as a recommendation, I certainly, would like to see that. So if everyone else is in agreement, that's great. Thank you.
Any officers want to add to that?
Just to say that we do work with a lot of schools. Again, with the grants we've got, just small scale building planters or planting trees, small orchards. Some of it is food grown, but others are just nature, enhancements. But again, the condition of the grant is that it has to be a school that is accessible to the community as well, not just a school itself. And there are complications with schools in that they're obviously not there for 6 weeks or during the holiday times, and it's just making sure that again that maintenance is kept up. But yeah, we are working with a lot of Swansea schools at the moment.
Right. Are there any additional questions that councillors would like to ask, please? No. Well, in that case, I would like to thank officers for attending this meeting this afternoon and for your contribution. And if you wish to leave the meeting now, then you are quite welcome. Thank you. Councillor Sillard.
Yeah, I know Councillor Alison Anthony, give her apologies because she's unwell. But I'm sure it'll be remiss of me if I don't say thank you to Alison and her team for all the work that they are doing with these projects as well. Thank you.
Right, okay, thank you very much. So if officers do wish to leave the meeting now, they are very welcome to do so before councillors will go into discussion and conclusions. Right, councillors. But the room is now virtually empty, and there's now for us a discussion and conclusions from all the councillors online. So, is anybody who wishes to lead first? I can't see a. Oh yes, there's a hand up, and that is Councillor Lyndon Jones. Thank you.
Thanks, thanks, Chair. What I got out of that actually is there's a lot of, there is good work going on, but it's not really joined up. And we really probably need it to be one cabinet member who's responsible across this, for this particular, subject area, and probably an officer whose responsibilities are overarching, because it seemed that there were lots of little bits going on, but we didn't have a strategy really for community growing in Swansea, and I think we're missing a trick there.
Yes, Lyndon, I think what you say there is perfectly correct. Actually, it seems as if it's spread quite thinly, and we actually need it. We need somebody to lead, really. And are there any other councillors who wish to pass comments or whatever? So
Yeah,
that is Councillor Wilt Thomas first.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just basically touching upon the points that I raised. I mean, obviously, I think if we could recommend a biodiversity governor be appointed to each school, I think it could be voluntary. I don't think we'd need to. We could, request every school has a biodiversity governor, and again, it's not mandatory, but they would send in just a one-page report every year on what the school's doing with regards to nature and biodiversity. The other thing that I was a little bit worried about was, although we've obviously offset all the management of the allotments to the allotment associations, whatever, we're not tracking how they're being run, and I'm sure they're all being run very well. But if there's some red flags, then if no one's to monitor them, maybe we could just have a yearly a capacity or a report, or how many vacant plots they have currently once a year. I'm sure that'd be enough. And then if there's a theme, if it's increasing year on year at a certain venue, then maybe we could take some action. Or maybe they could even put a number of vacant plots on the website, because we've got the list of all the contacts. and maybe they could, but I think it'd be better to update it once a year. Anyway, those are my only 2 points, Chair.
Right. Are there any other councillors who wish to pass comment or say anything?
Could I come back on one?
Yeah, yes, good. Yes, that's fine then.
Yeah, I'd support what Will was saying about getting one of the governors to take on that responsibility, because I don't think that happens in, I haven't heard of it happening in other areas, and it would be quite good for us to take a bit of a lead in that. So I think it's a really good idea for that to happen. And the other thing is on the allotments, it would be quite good to, you know, find out exactly, you know, what the position is throughout Swansea, and if there are vacancies, that they could be advertised, because sometimes people would travel to them. And finally, I think the point that I made about, you know, elderly people who've got gardens going spare, you know, in fact covered with brambles, it's a way, and I think that is something that, working with local councillors, that could be coordinated, and I think that needs to be done as well, actually, because if we are serious about getting community growing, you know, up and running, then, you know, we need to think outside the box.
Right, and now over to Councillor Will Thomas, please. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. One more thing. The Wild About My Ward thing, that sounded very good, but I don't recall hearing about that before. So I don't know if it's a new initiative they've been working on, or if it's something that they've had for a while. I certainly don't know if other councillors have heard about it, but if they haven't, then obviously what's the point in it unless we're, you know, being, you know, given the information that, you know, about our wards and the opportunities that we have for biodiversity and other things. Thanks.
Will Thomas has still got his hand up, but I can't see anybody else. No. No. So is Will Thomas still got your hand up? So do you have anything more to add, Will?
Sorry, I forgot to put it down. Legacy hand, Chair.
Okay, so sorry, that's fine. Okay. Sorry, I will get this right eventually. Right, in view of that, we have now reached the end of the meeting, and I thank all councillors for actually attending this meeting. Thank you very much. And wait, Rachel can stop the recording.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.